Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Jeff.
And I'm Chris.
And we are your prepared neighbors and hoping to become your go-to resource for all things preparedness. So today we've got a pretty exciting and cool topic. You know, there are some things within anything that you do in whatever walk of life you're in or whatever hobbies you might have that are not as boring and exciting as other things. I think batteries are pretty cool and we're going to be talking all about them today. And you know, they're sort of like the cornerstone of your life. I mean, literally everything almost that we put our hands on in some way or another has a battery, whether it's your cell phone or, you know, components within, you know, your laptop, you know, has a charger inside of it. Even when the main battery is dead, there's still keep alive batteries in there to maintain time and maintain other things. Everything's got a battery somewhere. Vehicles, lawn tractors, radios, flashlights, everything's got a battery in it. And we're going to do the best we can today to talk about all the different types of things that we need to be at least aware of as a prepared person. It's not always just as simple as I need a AA or I need a AAA. There are a lot of things that go into making the battery, the components of the batteries. When we talk about larger batteries like you would have in a vehicle or a mower or, you know, maybe if you have a gate and it's operated by a small battery, like all of these batteries are going to have different characteristics and traits and maybe even different maintenance requirements for different ones. And, you know, Chris and I were talking about, we were preparing for the episode today and making sure we covered everything that we thought would be important. And Chris actually was doing a little bit of research and came across a pretty interesting and cool development in the battery world. So at the very end today, he's going to discuss that with everyone for a few minutes as sort of a technological update that I think is going to be something that we want to pay attention to, you know, on the horizon and as capabilities and technologies and things continue to evolve.
Who knew batteries could be so exciting?
So exciting. Really crazy. It's wild. All right, Chris, do you have any fun or exciting things that you want to share with anybody before we jump in with all the deep dive technical kind of things? Any life excitement?
Everything, thankfully, is going as well as it can. There's no dumpster fires going on, and everybody's safe, happy. The dogs they're loving life. They're so lucky.
Yeah, they do get a little spoiled. I've been to your house before. I see how the dogs are taken care of over there. It's not a bad life. Oh man. Well, I see we got a lot going on. It's a busy time, and the girls have got all kinds of stuff going on. Getting pulled every different direction, and it's just a busy time. But we're doing the best we can to stay focused and try to have a little bit of fun. So, starting off here at the beginning of our discussion. We know that, like I just mentioned, we use batteries and everything, and they're everywhere. But what role are they going to play on the preparedness side of things? What differentiates your day-to-day battery use and your battery use from a preparedness kind of standpoint? And I think that the real key factor to keep in mind is, you know, for me as an example, I don't use my phone very much anymore. I'm not in the corporate world anymore where I need to be accessible 24 hours a day, and I need somebody to always be able to text me and I have to respond within so many seconds, and I'm spending an hour or two multiple times a day having long conference calls with people. That doesn't happen for me anymore. So I generally can plug my phone in and charge it on day one and then use it all day, day one, all day, day two, put it on the charger at the end of day two. And, you know, I'm good for, I wake up the next day and I'm good for 2 days. I just don't use it that much. That's obviously going to vary, for different people and their usage patterns and things like that. But it doesn't matter when the power is on. When you have electricity to your home or your office or wherever you are, a battery is dead or dying and you plug it in and you charge and that's it. And I think a lot of times we don't think about batteries until you hear the smoke alarm chirp or until you are kind of in a situation where that source of charging goes away. And I think that's something that we really have to kind of consider in the preparedness space. And it's got a lot of dynamics to it. It's not just, okay, well, I have a flashlight. I'll give you a good example. I bought some relatively cheap flashlights from Amazon, and I gave them to all of my girls and my wife and girls. I gave it to all of them for Christmas. So in the stockings, everybody got new flashlights, and they got two. The small ones were about 3 inches, and the larger ones were like 4 or 5. And they all take AAA batteries. And they're great, and they're really cool, and they were inexpensive. But they are bright. they're really, really bright for these cheap little batteries that I got. I'm sorry, cheap little flashlights that I got. But the problem is they will burn through those batteries quick because of how bright they are. Well, if I think, okay, well, let's just say as an example, there are 4 of us and we all happen to be together over the Christmas holidays. And well, technically there are 5 of us, but I know one of them's not going to be there this Christmas. That's why I said 4 of us. But let's say that there are 4 of us hanging out this holiday season and the power goes out. I'm like, well, that's okay because I've got, 2 batteries for each of them. I need to have 8 batteries. So we're good to go. Well, that's great for the first 15 minutes or 20 minutes or half hour that those flashlights are going to operate. But then when it's time to recharge and we don't have any power, that charging or that main source of charging is gone. And so that's component number 1 that we got to be considering is okay, well, we recognize that our source of power goes away and we have to be able to replace the power. So I think there's 2 primary means that I can think of. You either have to replace the power with another power source. So that could be using solar to charge, using solar to go into an inverter of some sort that can then charge, or solar to a larger battery, which then has chargers connected to it. Or you're looking at just having to have a whole bunch of batteries that can last you through the duration of whatever the outage might be. And I think most people will probably find a balance in the middle. I like to have a surplus of batteries. I have a lot of like the 18650 batteries, and some of those work in flashlights. Some of those work in my Meshtastic communication devices. I rotate them regularly, keep them charged. But figuring out that balance that's right for you, that's obviously going to be an individual decision. But as it relates specifically to the charging kind of element of things, that what's your backup plan going to be? And like I said, you can go out, you can fire up a small gas generator. And while that gas generator is keeping your refrigerator running, you're also charging your phones, you're charging power banks, and doing anything you can to store energy somewhere else. So we're going to kind of dive into a lot of this today, but what I want to do first is pass things over to Chris so that we can talk about the different types of batteries are there, which ones are good or better for different things, and just see if we can get a bit of an overview on things. So Chris, what do you got for us?
Well, you mentioned something that I think is pretty significant, and it kind of goes with the theme of the podcast, being prepared. You may talk about this a little bit later, I don't know, and that is having a schedule. When you mentioned the fire alarms, for years and years I've heard the fire department always recommends on January 1st, New Year's Day, that's when you go and you change all the batteries on your fire alarms. What else needs to be changed? If you have optics on your firearms, that may be a good time to change those as well. So having a schedule, some sort of a routine where you're swapping out batteries, making sure that, on the last day of the month, you're charging up your walkie-talkies or GMRS radios, whatever it may be. That's a good idea. Anyway, battery types. What they're good for? Well, from what I gather, batteries have been around probably since about the 1800s. There was a guy named Gaston Planté, and he got everything rocking and rolling there. That's not a definitive claim on the history of batteries, but that's generally accepted where he's the guy that got things moving. And I think he was the one that got us started with the lead acid batteries. And they're pretty much the go-to for heavy applications where it's got to be affordable, but it also has to be reliable. And so, kind of think of those as the workhorses of the battery world. They're affordable, but, they work. They really work. And then within those, you've got the wet cell lead acid batteries. These are the most common type you'll find under the hood of your car, your truck, your boat. They're filled with an liquid electrolyte, which is sulfuric acid mixed with water. This allows for a really efficient energy transfer. Well, what's good about that? Well, they're cheap, they're widely available, and if you need to pack a punch when you're starting up an engine that's got some high cranking power, those are the ones. Here's the catch, though. They do need regular maintenance. You've got to check the water levels, top them off with some distilled water, and make sure that they're not overcharged, or you're going to deal with some corrosion and some leaks. So if you're a DIYer with a garage full of tools, these are fine. But if you live in some of the real cold parts of the country or real hot, not so great. But forget about them in extreme vibrations or tilt. They can spill, they can make a mess. Next, you've got AGM batteries. That stands for absorbent glass mat. These are like the upgraded version of wet cells. Instead of free-flowing liquid, the electrolyte is soaked up into a fiberglass mat, making them completely spill-proof, which is nice, and vibration resistant. So no more topping off with water, and they can handle cold water better. They're great for off-grid setups like solar power systems or RVs where you need reliable deep cycle performance without the hassle. They're a little bit pricier than the wet cells, but they're worth it if you're what they call boondocking out in the wilderness or using a lot of marine equipment. Then there's the gel lead acid batteries. These take the spill-proof idea even further. What they do is they turn the electrolyte into a thick gel using some silica. They're super tolerant of deep discharges, which means you can drain them way down without damaging the cells, which is great for renewable energy or electric vehicles like golf carts. However, they do charge slower than the AGM or the wet cells, and they're sensitive to overcharging, which can dry out the gel. So if your application involves frequent deep cycles, like in a backup power system, well, a gel might be your pick. But don't expect lightning-fast recharges. Lead-acid batteries as a whole are great for the budget conscience, high-power needs, but they're heavy, have shorter lifespans, maybe about 300 to 500 cycles, and they aren't the most efficient. Still, for starting your car or storing solar energy on a shoestring, man, they're unbeatable.
You know, the one thing that a lot of people don't even know about the lead-acid batteries is they are only supposed to be discharged to 50% of their available capacity. So if you had, for example, 1,000 or 100 milliamp hour battery, it gets down to that 50% capacity. Going below that, you're damaging things. And that's kind of weird to think about that. I know I don't want to steal any thunder, but I know there's other battery options that allow you to go fully all the way down to 0% and they'll still maintain voltage and everything. But that's a real key consideration to keep in mind to make sure you're not damaging those lead acid batteries.
These are some of the things I wish they would have taught me in school. Maybe they did. I just wasn't paying attention. I don't know.
Yeah, there should be like practical life skills 101. I remember years ago when I was a kid, I think that in high school, I feel like we actually went through a checkbook and like they showed us how to like balance a checkbook. And,
Yep.
and that was one of those things back where they used to have auto shop classes and you had wood shop that you did as a student, industrial arts.
Yep.
Yeah, you did metalworking and different things.
You had metalwork or wood.
Okay.
But in I guess it was the general shop class, we could also do, they had lucite, where you heat the lucite up and you could make like little ashtrays. Well, not ashtrays because they would melt.
That's so funny how you could actually, where it would be like okay to make an ashtray or something as a kid without it being wrong. But yeah, those were, in fact, I remember doing sewing as a kid. I know we're on a sidebar, everybody, but that's what Chris and I do best is our ADD likes to kick in. But I remember sewing and like learning how to set a table. And I made shorts, like we had to make shorts in the class. And I had found a label. And back in like the 80s when Jams shorts were out, I actually found a Jams label that I sewed into mine, and I had told people like, no, this. I bought the pattern from wherever the pattern, like a Joanne Fabrics or wherever it was. I had the similar pattern to those Jams shorts, and I'm like, no, these are Jams. Look at the tag. And but yeah, that was part of all those life skills that we learned back in school before it was deemed no longer necessary. But I digress. Sorry for interrupting you there.
No, it's all good stuff. Next up is I guess we call it the lithium families. These are really, really popular. You see them in all the modern tech. They're lighter, they're more efficient, they last longer than the lead acid, but not all lithium batteries are created equal. Two of the biggest players are the LiPo and the LiFePO4. LiPo, or the lithium polymer, these batteries are all about high energy density. That means they pack a ton of power into a small, lightweight package. Perfect for drones, RC cars, smartphones, laptops, where space and weight are really, really critical. They can discharge quickly for bursts of power, and they recharge faster than many of the alternatives. Yeah, but there's a catch. Safety's a concern. LiPos are prone to swelling, overheating, even catching fire if they're punctured or overcharged, which is why they often come with protective circuits. Cycle life is solid, about 500 to 1,000 cycles, but they degrade faster in the heat. Now, on the flip side, you've got your LiFePO4, the lithium iron phosphate. These prioritize safety and longevity over raw density. These are way more stable. They've got a lower risk of thermal runaway, no exploding laptops here, and they boast impressive cycle lives, 2,000 to 5,000 cycles or more. Now, the energy density is lower than LiPo, so they're bulkier for the same capacity, but that's fine for applications like electric vehicles, solar storage, or e-bikes where reliability trumps compactness. They're also more tolerant of extreme temperatures. So if you're building a home battery bank or powering an EV, LiFePO4 is it's going to be safer, it's going to be a long-term bet, but it's going to cost you a little bit more upfront. Lithium batteries in general outshine lead acid in efficiency, 90 to 95% versus 70 to 80%, and in weight. But they're pricier, and they require battery management systems to prevent issues. So as the prices drop, they're taking over everything from power tools to grid-scale storage. However, don't count out the nickel-based batteries just yet. The nickel metal hydride and the NiCad or nickel cadmium might feel like relics from the 90s, but they still have niches where they shine. NiCad batteries are tough as nails. They're resistant to overcharge, deep discharge, and temperature extremes. They're used in power tools, medical devices, and aviation where reliability and harsh conditions matter. But they're heavy, they've got a lower capacity, and contain toxic cadmium, so they're being phased out due to environmental regs. The nickel metal hydride, these are a greener alternative. They've got a higher capacity, about twice that as the NiCad, and there's no cadmium. They're common in hybrid cars like the Toyota Prius for their balance of power and cost, plus rechargeable AA, AAA batteries for everyday gadgets. They suffer from self-discharge, losing charge when sitting idle, and they've got a shorter life cycle, about 500 to 1,000 cycles. But for low-drain devices like remotes or toys, they're affordable, eco-friendly, not bad. These nickel guys matter in legacy systems where lithium's cost or safety isn't justified, just like in some cordless phones or emergency lighting. And speaking of everyday use, let's compare those common household batteries to the specialty ones. Your standard AA or AAA alkalines are the rechargeables. They're often nickel metal hydride. They are everywhere. The remotes, clocks, flashlights. They're cheap, disposable, rechargeable, and they're great for low power intermittent use, but they're not built for high drain stuff. Stick to them for kids' toys and smoke detectors. Specialty batteries, they step up for demanding jobs. Jeff, you were talking about the 18650 cells. These cylindrical lithium-ion powerhouses. And by the way, did you know how they got their name?
I do not.
Well, it's from the measurements, 18 millimeter diameter and 65 millimeter length. So that's how they got their name. They are in everything from vape pens to Tesla cars. They're modular, high capacity, have up to about 3,500 milliamp hours. And they're customizable for DIY projects like flashlights or battery packs. Power tool batteries, often lithium-based packs from brands like DeWalt or Makita, are rugged, quick-charging, and designed for heavy cycles. So here you're talking about your drills or your saws on a job site. The key difference, though, everyday batteries prioritize convenience and low cost for casual use. The specialty ones, they're going to be the ones to focus on the performance, the durability, and the rechargeability for, being on a pro job site or some of the tech enthusiasts out there. Always, 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 when you're considering these things, always match the battery to the device. Using the wrong one can lead to leaks, poor performance, or safety risks, something you want to avoid at all costs. And going along with that, sometimes you see these things on Amazon, 10,000 milliamp hours from some no-name battery cell or power bank at rock-bottom prices. Look, what Mama told you was accurate. If it's too good to be true, it is. I mean, these knockoffs often exaggerate their capacity. And Jeff, you mentioned that you've got some equipment where you can test some things. We may do a video on that. They may say one thing, but they may only deliver 2,000 to 5,000 milliamp hours. They're made with cheap recycled cells. They overheat, they swell, or they fail after a few cycles. It's, the same old thing. You get what you pay for. And the safety, yeah, forget it. So high milliamp hours doesn't mean quality. My attitude is, especially when you're talking about survival or dependability, stick to reputable brands. Anchor, Samsung, Energizer, I like Duracell. Also check for reviews and look for something called a UL certification. It's kind of a standard out there. If it's half the price of the name brands, it's probably half the battery or worse. Save your money, avoid the hassle, the fire hazard. And when you need a battery, you need it to work.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of really important points just now. Some of the things that come to mind, and we're going to probably do somewhere between 6 and 10 videos on this episode alone. So stay in touch with our YouTube channel and check things out, because this is one of the things I want to show you guys. I have a couple of machines. One of them is a very inexpensive, like DIY kind of thing that's good for household use for regular people. Another one is a bit more expensive that I'm using for some electronics projects that I'm working on that I need a lot of precision and accuracy. So it's a little bit, kind of, I wouldn't say out of reach, but not what I would recommend for a DIY or just playing around with batteries. But being able to assess the discharge of these, because I've seen on Amazon some of these batteries making claims. It might be like a AAA battery claiming 5,000 milliamp hours, or a 18650 claiming 5 or 10,000. I have a whole bunch of them. I have tested a lot of them. I've done the discharge on them with the capabilities and tools that I have. Very few of them meet none of them meet those really high expectations. If you're buying the generic Amazon Basics and some of these others, I'm telling you, they're not going to work. But we're going to test them. I will buy some brand new ones. I will do videos on them, and I will show you exactly how that works and what the results are. But you mentioned something about batteries, not having any kind of built-in capability and things like that. A lot of your higher end, like your LiPo and your LiPo4s, these batteries have like a chip that's in there, an integrated circuit that manages the batteries and manages the flow of electricity in and out, like a regulator. And those cheaper things, they will bypass that stuff. And that UL rating and some of those other certifications, those things are critical to definitely pay attention to. So a lot of good info there, Chris.
The other thing that obviously comes into play there is if you're using crappy batteries, and yeah, there's a fire hazard, but also the device that you just put that thing in, you may have just ruined it.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially if the voltage regulation isn't where it needs to be.
You'll fry the other circuits, or it'll corrode, and man, done. So buying cheap is much more expensive half the time, or a lot of the time.
Okay, so next I want to talk to you a little bit about some things that will lead to failure in batteries. Now, I don't really think about this. Most of what I'm going to talk to you about, I don't really think about or consider when we are talking about smaller batteries like your AA's and AAA's. A lot of those are kind of, they're disposable. You throw them away when you're done. The ones that are not disposable, that are rechargeable, I typically maintain all of mine in the house. I don't leave them anywhere else, really. I mean, I guess there's a scenario or multiple scenarios where you could have them powering a small camera or a small device where they would be outside in the elements. Maybe you might be using a game camera and you've got like 4D batteries, So a scenario like that definitely puts them out in the elements where whenever they're subjected to extreme cold and heat, there's obviously going to be the potential for premature failure or things that would impact the lifespan of the batteries. But right now I want to talk to you about sulfation and what that means, because it's a important thing. If you've ever seen the F03 error code on a charger, that's going to be up because of a sulfated battery. And we're going to talk about this, I'm sure, a little bit more when we get into the charging section. But battery sulfation is the buildup of lead sulfate crystals on the plates of a lead acid battery. So this can happen when a battery is left in a discharged or partially discharged state for too long. Now, the buildup will reduce the battery's capacity. It makes it harder to charge, and it can lead to premature failure. Now, the sulfation is a natural part of a battery's normal operation, but you just don't want it to become permanent and to damage, if those crystals have the opportunity to harden over time. Now, sulfation affects all lead acid batteries, whether it's flooded, AGM, gel, spiral wound, like all of those can be, affected. Some of them are more resilient, than others. So what I thought might make sense is to talk about a couple of ways to address sulfation and maybe a couple of ideas to prevent it as well. So I want to talk to you about mainstream accepted, like industry accepted ways of dealing with sulfation. The best way I think to deal with it is prevention. So if you are keeping your batteries charged and maintained, it's not going to really be an issue. So even if you have a vehicle that you're not really using, going out and starting the vehicle once a week and letting it run for a half hour, that allows the alternator to put more charge back into the battery. It's good for the engine. It's good for all the systems of the vehicle to be running anyway. And that'll help maintain that battery a little bit. But one of the areas where it's more common for people to kind of drop the ball in this space is with lawn tractors and brush mowers, jet skis, anything that has a small engine that you only use seasonally.
Generators.
Yeah, any of those things that are battery powered like that, people are not usually great, myself included. I'm not picking on anybody else. I've only just recently started getting actually really, really good at this. Like I've started paying attention. I've invested money in different charging and protection methods, but most people are not doing everything they can. So take batteries and use trickle chargers. I use one, the company I think is called Battery Minder, I think is what they're called. And they actually have it, you plug it in, it does a slow 2 amp trickle charge, but it also automatically goes into a desulfation mode where it sends these like real high frequency pulses, it pulses them in like every couple of seconds to help break up that sulfation. So that would be like a normal process of attempting to desulfate the battery. And there's lots of batteries that have like a repair mode or a desulfation mode in there, and they function in different ways. Some of them you actually will use controlled heat. Like they will allow a high amount of amperage to flow into the battery for short bursts of time, short periods of time, which will generate a lot of heat quickly, but not too much. Now, it's important to control that heat because I'm going to talk to you now about a way that is highly controversial and can be deadly. And it's not a joke. I'm not playing around here. I am not telling you right now, hey, you should go and do this. This is a good, safe thing to do. That is not what I'm saying. I can tell you that I have done this before because I had to try it out because I thought it would be interesting to experiment with. I'll tell you how I did it, and I'll walk you through the whole thing that I did. But let me just make sure I'm crystal clear about this.
Don't try this at home, kids.
Yeah, there is a serious risk of injury with this. But the method involves using a stick welder, and you're going to you have a stick welder would have a ground clamp, and it has a electrode clamp or a stinger, they call it. And the stinger is what hooks onto your actual stick that you use to weld. So you're going to take your ground and you're going to hook the ground up to, the negative terminal on your battery. And you're going to take the stinger side. And normally what people do with that is they'll take like some vice grips, and they will vice grip to the positive side. And then they will connect the stinger onto the vice grips to complete, that portion of the circuit. Now, normally prior to doing this, prior to making these connections, there are a couple things that I probably should have told you before I got into the connecting part of things. You don't do this on a sealed battery. So if you have a sealed lead acid, AGM, anything that is a completely sealed battery, you are not going to do this. You have to use this or perform this on a battery that either has individual removable caps for each cell. Typically, there's going to be 6 of them. or the one that has like 2 pop-off lids that have 3 plugs in each one. So you need to make sure you're able to expose all cells. That's step 1. Step 2, you're going to need to make sure that the liquid that is inside of the batteries, typically you just top that off with distilled water. When I say top it off, there is the area where you can look down and see that there is a water level as soon as it touches the very bottom of the case. You don't need to fill it all the way to the top of that cylinder. Just as soon as the water level touches the bottom of the cylinder where the stopper goes in, that's where you're going to stop. And you especially don't want to overfill it when getting ready to do this exercise I'm describing. But you can just replace that with distilled water. Don't use regular water. It has minerals and things in it that can contribute to failure and degradation of the plates and the cells. Now, another thing you can also do is you can get a battery hydrometer. And what you can do is you can put the end of this into those cells and suck the liquid out. And it measures the specific gravity of the contents of that liquid. And it tells you if it's within the right range that it should be for sulfuric acid. So if you're having charging issues and the battery is not maintaining a charge, it's not able to accept a charge, the first thing I would do is top everything off with distilled water, test it with the hydrometer, and just see if it's actually at the right specific gravity. If it's not, you can buy liquid sulfuric acid for your batteries, follow all the process to remove it. Well, I'll tell you what I did. I had 5 cells in my battery that were perfectly fine. Everything was good. They were all within normal range. 1 cell was showing 0, like it was just water. I bought test tube caps, like these little rubber test tube caps, and I put them into the 3 cells that were on the one side. I left the one cap on to close 3 cells. The other cap was removed, exposing 3 of them. I put these stoppers into 2 of them, flipped the battery upside down, drained it into a container, labeled the container used battery acid to make sure I know to take that to dispose of it properly. Don't dump that in the yard or into the toilet or down the drain or anything. But then I replaced the sulfuric acid and filled it back up to the right level. And then I was getting good numbers, and it allowed me to move on from there. So step 1 is definitely making sure that you have good quality, electrolyte inside of those cells, and that you're topped off to the right level, being step 2. Now, you're connected up like I told you before about your welder. This is the part that gets dangerous because as you heat up this battery, it will off gas. I believe it's a hydrogen gas, if I recall correctly. And the gas that it will come off of this, and it will literally be coming out of those cells, that gas is flammable. So if you have a good solid connection to each of the terminals, the ground cable, and to the positive side where you would normally be connecting your electrode, your stick for stick welding, that's kind of step 1. Step 2 to me, though, on that is I would put something over them, like where the terminal and the vice grips and the terminal and the clamp, where they meet each other. I would probably put some thick rags or something over top of them so that if there is a spark, that spark gets contained, within the rag. But if you make a spark at any time while those caps are open and that heated gas is coming out, you will have an explosion. And you just don't want to be a part of that. So while we're on that subject, let's talk about the PPE that I was using when I did this. So when I did this, I had clothing on head to toe, and because I don't usually normally work in the yard nude, but I was.
That's a different podcast, Jeff. Naked yard work.
Whole different.
Scared Neighbors podcast.
Yeah, exactly. So I had regular clothes on, normal, jeans and some work boots or whatever I was wearing. But from starting at my head, I had, I had a hat on, just, protecting, covering my head. But then I had a face shield, and that face shield was one that I would use if I were using like a angle grinder. It's just a face shield that completely blocks anything from splashing up onto, against, and hitting my head. And then I had on below that as a secondary protection, I had just some regular safety glasses. I was wearing a welding shirt, and it's just a real thick, heavy shirt used in welding, which covered all the way down to my arms. And then I put on welding gloves. And these are just real thick, heavy duty gloves that go almost to the elbow. They're at least about 3/4 of the way up my forearm towards the elbow. But all exposed skin was completely covered. Because what happens when you're doing this, there's two risks. One of them, of course, is the risk that you would have from these gases exploding. And I mean, it shouldn't be the kind of thing where it would explode. And with all that PPE that I had on, I should be safe. I should be okay. Obviously, if something happened, I want to get these things off of me quickly because there's going to be battery acid everywhere. You want to go ahead and pre-plan for if something happens, where am I going to wash myself, anything that was exposed or contacted. I mean, you really got to take this seriously. This is a high-risk operation. You can go on YouTube and probably watch hundreds of videos of people seemingly doing it safe. And I would say probably 997 out of 1,000 times there won't be an issue. But 3 times there will be, and they're probably not going to be super fun. Now, I've watched multiple guys do videos who said, yeah, I had one blow up on me. That kind of sucked, right? And so it's one of those things that can happen, and maybe it's not life-threatening. I really value my vision. Like my vision and my hearing are such big deals to me that like I'm really super protective of that. So I don't know. You just got to be careful. So the second thing that can happen is you can have an internal short inside the battery. And when you have an internal short and then you apply a massive amount of amperage, that can actually cause another type of explosion with the battery that can be really dangerous. So all of these disclosures, disclaimers, and all this kind of stuff out of the way, a whole lot of people have successfully recovered batteries and have made claims like never buy a new battery again for the rest of your life. Like you can do maintenance on your batteries this way. And the method that they use, and I've seen and heard different ways, I will tell you the one method that I used that worked well for me is I hooked up to the battery, again, making sure the electrolyte level was topped off, but not all the way to the very top, just to the bottom edge of the fill area. And I connected up at 30 amps. And then I turned on my welder and I ran it for 5 minutes. And what you want to monitor for is you want to keep an eye on, you can look down into the cells and you can see if it might be boiling a little bit. You can see some activity. Pay attention to the sides of the battery. If you start to see any swelling in the case of the battery, stop immediately, game over. There's an internal short of some sort or internal damage. You're done. It's over. Just pack it up, trade it in, give it to your local auto supply shop, AutoZone, Advance Auto, O'Reilly, wherever you get your batteries from. Take it there, turn it in, get rid of it. So you're looking for any swelling of the case, any excess heat. If you have one cell that's getting really, really hot, you want to stop. You want everything to be nice and balanced and happening equally when doing this. So do the 5-minute run. And I recommend before you do this, hook up a voltmeter and just check what the volts are and, write down your voltage. Do that 30 amps. And then, that's 5 minutes. And then wait at least 5 minutes, but maybe even as much as 15 minutes. Let things cool down again. And then go up to 50 amps. And I did 30, 50, 50 when I did mine. Some people do 50, 70, 100. Some people really crank it up. My recommendation is it's okay, I think, to have it at a little bit of a boil. That's okay. You just don't want it boiling where things are splashing out and you're getting a lot of excess heat and a lot of off-gassing. And remember, in between each of these 3 cycles, make sure you're checking your voltage, but also refill that electrolyte back up to to the level that it should be. And then when you get to the very end of it, I would say let it, after the 3 cycles, give it about an hour to cool off. And then if you have a battery tester you can hook up to, I got mine for $15 or $20 on Amazon. And it can hook up, it can test, it gives you the internal resistance of the battery. It tells you the status of charge, status of health, the voltage that's coming out. Once you go through all of that and you think that it looks like it's holding some voltage, run it through a good overnight 2 amp, just set it for 2 amps and let it charge overnight. And then check again after, 12, 14, maybe even 24 hours. And ideally, if everything goes as it should, you've recovered your battery. That heat will break up that sulfation and allow the battery to function again. You can also, again, double check the electrolyte afterwards. Once you've got it all fully charged, everything is good. I should say before you do your overnight charge, make sure that all your electrolyte levels are good if I didn't already mention that. But a whole lot of people, like I said, I recovered a battery that was dead by all utilities. I used the battery minder. I had it on the sulfation mode for like a month. I tried a, what's that battery? NOCO, I think it is. I had the NOCO Genius 10 or something like that. I had that running in repair mode at least 10 different times. I did get some improvement, but none of them worked the way that the welder did. So again, it's dangerous. It's high risk. Do it outside in an open area with a lot of fresh air. If you can put a fan blowing across it while you're doing this to make sure that those fumes don't have a chance to congregate anywhere, I really recommend it. But it is a way of doing things. Now, I recommended before about your hydrometer and flushing and checking and all of that. Generally, you don't have to do that process. If it's a little bit low, you add some distilled water and you're fine. But this is just your good day-to-day maintenance thing. So you definitely want to make sure that you're staying on top of that. Now, I want to move over. I touched briefly on charging and chargers, but I want to spend a little bit more time here and talk about this with some more detail. In general, broadly speaking, most batteries respond much better to a slower charge at a lower amperage. So you can do, like I generally charge everything at whatever the lowest is, and it's typically 2 amps is usually where that's going to be. I'm not in a hurry. It's not a rush for me. The times where I have used a higher setting is when I need the battery quickly for some reason. It might be a battery is dead and I need to get it to start a vehicle or whatever. I may, in that case, use a higher amperage just to get things moving.
So that's a really good point, because you can buy, and if I hadn't known this, I would have said, oh yeah, I want one of those. It's a fast charger for your rechargeable batteries. No, that's the last thing I want to use. I mean, if I had to, yeah. But just in general, the slower rate of charge is going to be much better for your battery. It preserves the battery health and the longevity. Overall, if you can afford to recharge that battery at a slower rate, it's so much better. And I had no idea. I mean, these things are marketed. Hey, buy yourself a quick charge charger.
And it's disappointing, really, that things are that way, that people or companies are willing to say, I really don't care about the person who's made the investment in whatever this device is or whatever.
This is horrible for our product, but boy, you'll need to buy more of them.
Yeah, it's disappointing, but it's important to remember, like Chris and I have both just mentioned about, low amperage, slow. It's kind of like cooking brisket or pork or something like that, right? Low and slow. Now, but like I said, low amperage for everything. The only time you want to use high amperage, let's say you go outside, and I'm going to talk in a minute about different types of chargers, but a lot of the chargers have like a starting mode, and it's going to blast like 50 amps to the battery really quickly. And and they'll tell you, do this for like 15 seconds. I think it's like max is like 15 seconds. And then you've got to turn that off for 2 minutes and don't hit that again with another 50 amps for 2 minutes. And the whole thing is they're trying to protect the battery, but they want to give you really fast amperage so that you can hopefully start your car. And the way that this works is, you hook up positive to positive, negative to negative on the battery, plug the charger in, set it to 50 amps. Count 1, 2, 3. And like I said, you hit 10 seconds, you turn it off. My recommendation, if the battery's really dead and you're, for whatever reason, you're down below 10 volts, let's say, I would probably do like 3 cycles of that, 50 seconds or 15 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever it is, 2 minutes off, do it again. Check the voltage. And I would keep going. Ideally, you want that voltage in that, 12.6, 12.7 kind of range, but hit it a couple of times in those 10-second bursts. And that hits real high amperage, and that should allow you to get the vehicle started.
I think my daughter's truck, her battery went dead. And so it was the Jeep. And it wouldn't start. And so I hit, I guess it's called the boost button. I hit that thing, and man, that Jeep immediately fired up. As soon as it fired up, I took everything off, and then we drove the Jeep around for a while. So is that...
Yes. So that's practice? A great example. So
because then you get your alternator going and
yes. So the newer ones do this much more intelligently, and I've got a similar one to what you're describing. and it's like a booster that has that boost function. It's a battery booster, like a portable battery booster.
Because you hook it up, and then you hit.
You press the button.
You press the button, and you try to start your vehicle, and it doesn't start. And so then you hit the boost button, and wow,
I've got the same
fired up. It was awesome.
I've got the same thing in mine, and I had to do it. I had to do like 4 cycles of it but it's fine. You turn it on, you press that little boost button like you're talking about, and it had like a 5-second countdown, and then it says start now, and that's doing the exact same thing without you as an individual having to manage it. Like the manual battery charger I was just describing, you switch it. It has 2 amps, 10 amps, and 50 amps. So you switch it to 50 amps, you have to manually say, okay, I'm done. I'm going to turn this off. Whereas that is computer based, and people would always use the words idiot proof. I don't think idiot proof is really the right word. It's more like just ignorant of, right? If you don't understand the underlying operation of these chargers and what's important and why it's important, it's not that you're stupid. You just don't understand it. You're ignorant to it. And that thing like Chris is talking about, and we'll see if we can get a link somewhere maybe in the description to talk about this. You know what? We'll add that to our videos. We'll do a video showing how that works because
I love this thing.
Yeah,
it's
Chris
awesome.
and I both have them, and they are incredibly capable and really useful to have. And they take your old school portable battery booster, like they take it to the next level with being able to deliver that high amperage like that. Chris and I decided to talk about this subject for about another 45 minutes, and we wanted to make sure we're breaking the episodes up into smaller, more consumable episodes. So this is going to wrap up episode 10, part 1, and we'll be releasing episode 11, part 2 next week. And the new updated battery information that Chris was talking about at the beginning of this episode, it will be at the end of episode 11, the part 2. Well, folks, thanks again for listening. If you have any questions or you want us to dive deeper into something or a specific episode idea, drop us an email, just info@preparedneighborspodcast.com. And as always, don't be scared.
Be prepared.
We'll talk to you next time.